Hi, I'm Mindy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my September horror wrap-up, and I read 6 horror books in September, and I participated in quite a few reading challenges and readathons, and I'm going to talk about all the prompts I finished for those in this video. The first horror book that I finished in September is a short story anthology called In Darkness Delight, Creatures of the Night, which is edited by Evans Light, who I've been hearing a lot about lately. He's put out his own short story collection, and he's been editing a lot of great short story collections lately. This anthology had a lot of big names. All of the stories were, pretty much all the stories were from authors I had heard from. Some were brand new authors, but they do have books that have come out lately that I was aware of. So just some really interesting voices that I was interested in hearing about. Some of the big names in this collection were Josh Mallerman, Richard Chismar, and Chad Lutzke. I really liked most of the stories in this collection. There were a few that I thought were a little too bizarre or strange, but for the most part, I loved them all. Especially considering that I love creature features. I love anything with a good creature in it. And these stories were all really unique creatures that you don't hear about every day for the most part. And I gave this collection 4 stars. I finished one more short story anthology, and that was the next horror book that I finished in September, and that was Haunted Nights, edited by Ellen Doutlow and Lisa Morton. This is a standout, fantastic anthology, and I gave it 5 stars. And again, all very recognizable names in the authors contributing to this anthology. Some of the bigger names were Seanan McGuire, Stephen Graham Jones, and my personal favorite, John Langan. He wrote The Fisherman, my favorite book. And this was the second thing that I had ever read from him, a short story in this anthology. And that story was really interesting. It was written like a true crime story, kind of telling the behind the scenes story of a crime. It's a very unique way to write a fiction story, to write it like true crime, nonfiction type of thing. So I could see how some people, it might not be their favorite, but I just absolutely loved it for some reason. Yeah, I really liked that. I liked how different it is to write a story in that way. So yep, I'm 2 for 2 on reading John Langan. I love his stuff so far. The rest of the collection, I also loved every single story in this collection. I gave it 5 stars, and the theme of this anthology is that all the stories take place on Halloween or Day of the Dead, some of those darker holidays. That is a theme that I am very down for. I could not get enough of these creepy stories. It was perfect for this time of year. And Haunted Nights fulfilled a couple of challenges. One was for the 3-month Halloween reading challenge hosted by Richard at Are You Into Horror? And September's prompt was to read a book that takes place on Halloween, and all of these stories were focused around Halloween for the most part. And it fulfilled a prompt for the Halloweenathon hosted by Purgatory Paul, the godfather of BookTube, whose channel is SnowCone72. And it fulfilled the prompt of read a book about someone or something haunted. The next book that I finished in September was Beneath by Christy DeMeester. This is a really great book. I absolutely loved it and gave it 5 stars. I read a short story collection by Christy DeMeester, and I really loved that collection, but Beneath is like a whole nother level up. It was really amazing. It kind of blew me away. And Beneath follows a woman who is a reporter, and she goes to a town to investigate a snake handling cult, and she has a lot of issues with organized religion because she has a very traumatic past with a pastor in her church growing up. And she is really nervous and uncomfortable going to investigate this church and looking under the surface of what may be hiding. And what she finds is super creepy. This book had a lot of heart. It dealt with a lot of uncomfortable issues, but it was done really well, in my opinion, and it was really strange and creepy, and all of the wonderful things I want to be reading about this time of year. Beneath by Christy DeMeester is going to be a new book on my favorites list. And that book fulfilled a prompt in the Halloweenathon hosted by Paul at SnowCone72 as well, which was to read a book about a cult or the occult. And the American Horror Stories Reading Challenge hosted by Prue Pruitt. It fit the prompt for cult. The next horror book that I finished in September is another great book, and that is Fat Camp by James Sabata. And this is a really great slasher book that takes place at a fit camp. I was a little skeptical going into Fat Camp because I thought it might be fat shaming or making fun of fat people way too much, something like that, maybe a comedy or something. And what I got was a lot different than I thought. It was a coming of age story about these kids in the fit camp, and it does deal with negative self-image, so they do think some bad things about themselves, and it deals with really serious issues such as bullying, and these kids are dealing with even bigger issues in some cases, such as loss of a loved one or some kind of trauma that has caused their issues with food. Not in all cases, but in some. And when I was reading the front of the book, it has a bit about the author, and it says that he has dealt with an eating disorder in his life. So he kind of took that as inspiration to write this book. So I thought it was a really great coming of age story, and it had really fantastic character growth for the main character. The slasher part of the book, which is a really big part, was also really great and fun. So yeah, coming of age with a whole lot of murder. And I loved it. I gave it 4 stars overall. In Fat Camp, I read for Step Readathons, which was September 14th through the 27th, hosted by Linda's World of Books, and I read past my bedtime. And it was for the prompt to read a book about murder, death, or a missing person. It also counted for the prompt of 1984 for the American Horror Stories Reading Challenge to read a book that takes place at summer camp or a slasher, and this book is both. Next, I read Nightmare by Chad Nicholas, which was an e-arc that I had from the author, and I have a review up about that book. It is a psychological horror novel, and it was really creepy, scary, and full of twists. And I read that for the Step Readathons as well, for the prompt of reading a horror, mystery, or thriller book. And the last horror book that I read in September was The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a novel about some young Native American men that go on a hunting trip. They kill more elk than they were ever thinking they would, and somehow it starts a very supernatural chain of events that affect their lives forever. A lot of this story takes place on the reservation, and it was a really refreshing point of view. It was very literary. It also had its really messed up, gory action moments as well. And it was just super highly entertaining. I really loved The Only Good Indians, and I gave it 4 stars. And I read that for the Step Readathons as well, and that was for the prompt, read a book with black on the cover. So those are the 6 horror books that I read in the month of September. Have you read any of these books? If so, what do you think of them? Do you want to read these books? Have I made you interested in reading them? Whatever you want to tell me, we can talk about it down in the comments. If you like this video, you can hit like and subscribe, and I'll be back very soon with another book-related video. Thanks.